A relatively new article funded by the National Institutes of Health entitled, Associations Between Obesity and Comorbid Mental Health, Developmental, and Physical Health Conditions in a nationally representative sample of U.S. children aged 10 to 17 found that middle school-aged children struggling with being overweight are likely to suffer poor health activity restriction. Impaired psychosocial functioning are at increased risk for repeating a grade, more likely to have school problems, show increased absences, suffer from ADHD, show a higher prevalence of conduct disorders, increased rates of depression, increased levels of anxiety, higher prevalence of learning disabilities, increased rates of asthma, increased rates of allergies. The children typically have increased rates of headaches, ear infections. The authors of this article show that obesity rates among adolescent emerging adults has doubled from 1988 to 2006. Increased obesity rates exist alongside many of these mental health problems. While we cannot say for sure that obesity causes mental physical health problems, these concepts do work in tandem with one another. What we can be certain of is that obesity is correlated with children being bullied. Being bullied likely contributes to an increased risk for many of these mental health disorders, and one could argue puts these youth at increased risk for many of the associated physical health problems as well. Middle school is an important time in a developing child's life. One could argue that the level of development experienced by middle school students is second only to a newborn baby, in terms of the amount that one will develop physically and mentally in such a short period of time. Throughout one's time in middle school, one will likely notice that some students are more physically mature than they are emotionally mature. Students will also begin to realize that otherworldly things have impacts on their lives, for instance the school shootings in Florida or the political conversations in our country. Middle school children are likely to hit certain pubescent milestones like having a menstrual cycle and/or changing of one's voice. Some will begin to grow hair on their bodies. Many students will begin to grow physically stronger at this time in their lives. Many students will begin to question authority during this time in their lives. Students no longer believe in Santa Claus, imaginary friends, or other types of mythology when reaching this age. Finally, many students will start to develop a worldview at this time in their lives. This worldview can be adversely impacted if one is routinely bullied, berated, suffering physically, mentally, and emotionally for a genetic issue like obesity over which many have little or no control.
All hope is not lost. Former President and First Lady Obama began school lunch programs, promoted dieting and exercise. Some could argue that these initiatives have been decreased in the current political climate, but progressive states like New York and California are subsidizing public schools where the federal government is falling short. Increased mental health support for middle school students is happening in many parts of New York State, many parts of our country, and in many places around the world. This time in middle school is important. In many ways this will lay the foundation for the rest of developing children's lives. If any children are experiencing bullying, physical or mental health problems, the persons should try and access treatment and support for these issues before these problems become insurmountable. The future is bright. Many of these students realize that and want a better world for themselves and future generations than the world that was handed to them.